Okay. It says we're streaming on Facebook.
Okay, great. Hello, welcome everyone. This is Mia Signs and Rebecka Eggers, and I love Rebecca's work. She's brilliant with trauma. She's brilliant with a lot of things, but her Egyptian astrology reading is so powerful that it's added so much impact and benefit over the years into my life that I had to share her with you today, because she has written this astrology report for 2021. We all want to know what the heck is going on in 2021, don't we, Rebecka?
That is a question.
Exactly. So the thing that I love about Rebecca's work too is she doesn't get into all the nitpicky bullshit. She gives you the facts, ma'am, and nothing but the facts. So this is really beautiful. So let's start talking about, first of all, why did you name it FireBrand?
Because 2021 is like based on the Egyptian astrology, and we're going to make some distinctions today. But based on the Egyptian astrology, 2021 is like the Kundalini rising. It is the shattering of the old reality. And I say that based upon the distinction between what's going on this year and what's going to be happening next year. Let's just back up to this year. This year has been the unholy trinity of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto conjunct, and then Mars has been forming all these squares in Aries, direct and retrograde. So at the beginning of the year, I wrote that 2020 was going to be, the meeting of the structures of our lives were going to meet their obliteration.
They did.
This was before I had any inkling of the pandemic. Like I keep telling my partner, like we went to the beach in January and I was just like, oh, I just keep holding on to that moment when we were at the beach, when we were still innocent, because I wrote it and then I just kind of put it away and I didn't really, I didn't know how that was going to show up. And it turned out that I couldn't have been more accurate, because coronavirus has been not just the obliteration of the systems, particularly in the United States, like just destruction right and left, but it has been the obliteration of biological systems. Like if you look at the way the virus functions, it just takes out, when it becomes a severe case, it just obliterates the functioning of the human body. I think one commentator said it was very well designed to kill. So I saw all of that at the beginning of 2020. And if I contrast that with what I see now as we're heading into 2021, we're coming up on the moment when both Jupiter and Saturn, which have been conjunct in Capricorn with Pluto, and Pluto is like death for resurrection in Egyptian astrology. It's Osiris. So that's the soul's journey of death for resurrection. So that was like pegged into the structures of our lives. And, Jupiter, which is grace and expansion, was like amplifying all of that. So now those planets are going to start to pull apart, and Jupiter and Saturn in December are moving into Aquarius. So that's one thing. Another thing is, that, Uranus, which has been in Taurus for a while now, but it's moving in to take center stage. And a traditional astrologer might see this really differently. But what I see is that Uranus is the Kundalini fire, and Taurus is Hathor, which is, that's my Southern girl pronunciation of an Egyptian name that I don't think anybody really knows how to pronounce based on the hieroglyphs. So forgive me. But Hathor is pleasure and joy and richness and feminine wholeness. So you have that driving the Kundalini energy. And this moves into center stage because you have Jupiter squaring Uranus, and then you have Saturn squaring Uranus throughout the year. And there's Mars squares that can, continue to also play out in the early part of 2021. And there's some continuing influence of Mars, which is the destructive force that starts the journey of death for resurrection. But it also starts the journey of resurrection itself. Like it has a dual purpose. It's Seth in Egyptian mythology. So what I see happening in 2021 is definitely not like la 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 la, we're walking through the park.
Yeah.
Squares are tense formations. They are miraculous formations. It's like, hello, I'm changing the track of your life today. And we've had a lot of that in 2020. Haven't you felt like just jerked from one reality to another, like, one moment of destruction to another? So we have all this going on in 2021. And the really exciting part is that Saturn is in Aquarius, and Aquarius in Egyptian, if we reconcile it to the Egyptian, is Ptah, which is like the divine fire embodied, right? Like, so it's also the collective, it's the collective energy and innovation and creativity. And so we have Saturn, which is this fixative energy, that, like, haven't you felt it all year that Saturn has been holding us in like our worst nightmare, right? Like we've seen all of our fears coming right up in front of us, and we're just held in place despite all the destruction around us. Like we are where we were the moment that it happened, right? So that's different in 2021 because you bring together the structures of our lives with innovation and the divine spark, and it's just this invitation to innovation with this like powerful dual feminine influence of the fire. Sekhmet is also implicated here. So you have the Uranus is Wadjet, and Sekhmet is Ptah's partner, and she enlivens his creations. So you've got all of this amazing feminine fire energy happening. And we start the year with a fire trine. So we have 3 planets. I'm going to space switch 3 at this moment because I need to look at I have this huge book that's like 1 million miles thick that my partner put together for me. But it's Venus in Sagittarius, the moon in Leo, and Mars in Aries.
Fire.
I saw this as like the ring of fire from birthing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that fire trines are that rare necessarily. It was the positioning of this fire trine. And I just saw the head crowning. Like for those people who have really been in the duat, been in the underworld, I feel like I've been there forever. This is the crowning moment when the work is coming to fruition. So like I see, what I say in the report is that the passionate warrior will be born. And for me, the passionate warrior is someone who's wedded to this new world, this thriving world that we want to move into. And their next move is not to get to that world, it's to learn to live in that world. So this is the gateway to what we've been working so hard for. So that's why I called it FireBrand. That's how I see the key distinction between this year and last year too. So if you were to look at a list of everything that was happening and you look at how many stelliums, which is 4 or more planets like conjunct basically, there are, and where they are, it's totally different. We have huge Gemini influence, which in Egyptian astrology is Akaru, which is the gateway of the present moment. So you have the north node of destiny that is in Gemini, and you have the south node, which is karma, paired up with Sagittarius, which is Sekhmet, which is like like the karma of your life matched up with its like complete transformation through new vision. So I know that was a lot, but
it's very cool. Yeah.
Wow, like it's definitely a FireBrand.
I think that people are starting to feel that shift that you're talking about. I know I have. This has been a ball buster of a tough year for everyone. Most people that I talk to, they're either dying or they have diseases that'll kill them or whatever, right? And it's about whether I've lost a lot of friends this year, whether they've gone on or whether they're going to heal it or change it or, shift it. So all of us in one way or another has experienced exactly what you're saying. And I believe that this opening path, we don't want to fraudulently or falsely look at it and go, woohoo! That's not what you're saying. You're saying you're stepping into living it, not into. So I love that you said that, because do you remember when the Lionsgate was present and going to open? I think this was 2017 or 16. And first it started in January, and then it opened in August 8th. I think it was 2016 or 17. And then every year everybody's like, well, oh my God, Lionsgate is opening, but they didn't know what to do with it, right? They didn't know how to have that benefit their life. But what it seemed like in that moment, we started going down into a shithole. Excuse me, everybody. But everything started spiraling, and it seemed to get worse and worse and worse. So in that respect, I stopped looking at what others were saying astrologically, but I always understand and respect your reports. That's why you're my girl. And I really feel that what you're saying is really true. This is a beautiful opening. And yes, it's my experience and it's your experience from creating your report, but I know a lot of people are seeing that. There's a lot more fluidity with people nowadays in the last week or so, because we were in a really tight with those planets now. We were very tight and restrictive. We couldn't move. And now it seems like a flow.
Yeah. And I want to point out, Mia, that, this year has not been the same for everyone. Like if you look at New Zealand, or I was reading about how Taiwan has handled the coronavirus, like those societies who were already in a collective frame of mind have not had the same kind of destruction. If you look where the destruction is worse, it's in the places where selfishness has prevailed, to put it bluntly, where today, just to give some credibility to what I'm saying, today I saw a clip from Fox News that I don't know if it was from today or yesterday, where they were saying, yeah, in my native Kansas, they did this study and some cities enforced the mask mandate and some didn't. And it turns out in those that had the masks, people are not dying. I was like, wow, everyone broke into two camps, and there was this fierce, rugged individualism. You're not going to tell me what I'm going to do. And those places are hot pockets of death. And then you have the places who came together with a collective movement to stop the virus. And they didn't perceive the masks as a sign of restraint on freedom. They saw it as an opportunity to work together to save lives. And those places are seeing that lives have been dramatically saved. And that's just an example from within the United States that backs up what I'm saying. Where there was collective minded action, people have not suffered as much. And where there are these pockets of rugged individualism, where I'm the only one that matters and it's my choice and all of those things, we're seeing that people are suffering. And this is really, I think, a distinction that is going to continue through 2021 as it becomes more and more painful to be in that selfish mindset, to be in that me first mindset, because the collective symbolism, whether you use traditional astrology or you use Egyptian archetypes, is moving towards the collective. And we can have a collective nightmare or we can have a collective bliss state, for lack of a better way to say it. And I was really careful, and we can talk about this later if you want to get into it, but I was really careful when I wrote this report to couch it in those terms, that there are two versions of reality competing with each other right now. And that those two versions of reality have almost nothing in common. And how I see that playing out, we can get into that later if we have time, but just something for your viewers to consider is that it's time to break out of this individualism that has us clobbering one another over our rights and come together for collective purpose and vision.
It's amazing because this time has allowed people to pause and to look at that emotional state and their spiritual state. And it's interesting, you said the US, talking about it is a disconnect with humanity, the selfishness in that. So this is a good time for us to look at our insides, who we are as a person. It's also in our spiritual alignment, which I think is what we need more. This is just my opinion, everybody. We need more as a people in order to discover kindness and love and generosity and supporting each other more, like the mask versus no mask thing, right? So I love that you put this together. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions. What is the single greatest difference between the astrology of 2020 and 2021?
Destruction versus, as Joe Biden has, I mean, they've tapped into it, build back better. That is the distinction. Like Donald Trump has been destruction embodied. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have really tapped the energy with their transition slogan and their transition website, which is Build Back Better. So it's not just building, it's building with innovation. It's building with new voices. It's really allowing new perspectives. Like I'm watching how they're bringing in like the communications team that they're bringing in. I mean, that's really important because the word. So the communications team that they're bringing in is a really great example. It represents diversity. It represents the voice of the feminine. Or, at least there are female voices represented there, and there are female archetypes all over this year. So I also would say 2021 is a time for opening up pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. That's crazy. That was the one thing that I connected to this year. Seriously. I knew that would save my life. Literally, that. But I also started painting with pleasure too. The paint makes me look and feel, not look, but feel beautiful. It's a connection that I love that you said that, because if more people went inward for pleasure to create it, we would be totally different. We talked about this privately before. You mentioned this to me, that you believe that next year is the essence of the collective transformation. And why is that?
Well, we went over some of this already, but it has to do with that Aquarian influence. And also, I'm glad you asked that and re-emphasized it, because I didn't really spend enough time on Jupiter. Like, how could I overlook that? And I just want to say that I read with the Porphyry system. So sometimes what I get in my charts is a little different. So if there's anything that you're like, why is she saying that? And it's not in these other things that I read. I just want to get that out there, that I use that. And Porphyry is really associated with royalty. I love the symbolism of that. So Jupiter in the Egyptian mythology correlates to Horus. And that's victory and expansion and grace. And there's going to be a Jupiter in Aquarius, as I said, conjunction with Saturn. And then Jupiter is also going to have a square with Uranus. So really grace and expansion, provoking, expanding that feminine, fiery pleasure energy in a way that is going to be miraculous. That's going to be like, let me just move you to another reality today. So 2021 is going to be this time of miraculous movement into that pleasure state, into what I call coherence. I'm not the only one, but I'm a heart math facilitator. I'm a certified heart math facilitator. And so coherence is really like what the Eastern philosophers would call enlightenment, I think. It's definitely what is cultivated by meditation practices. Its foundation is joy and love and pleasure and courage even. So whatever you might call a positive emotion is associated with coherence. And so we have that represented in the movement of Uranus, right? With this Uranus and Taurus that's coming, I mean, it's just becoming more and more powerful as time goes on. And then this expansive energy that's in the collective sign. So it's just going to be a time where new things are coming alive in the collective, and where the collective becomes much more important, and we can devolve collectively, and some people will, and we can transform into this pleasure energy, and those of us who are committed to doing that, committed to being in coherence, are going to open up whole new vistas for ourselves.
Awesome. It's beautiful. Now, you use Egyptian mythology in your astrology reports. When you told me this years ago, why you chose this Egyptian astrology, I loved it. So will you share that with everyone else? Because I think it's really important for them.
Yeah, I think it is a really important distinction. I'll just take Pluto as an example. If you look at Pluto as an archetype in modern astrology, it is literally just death. It's the evolution from pre-patriarchal to patriarchal mythologies. And so you lose the fact that in Egyptian mythology, Pluto or Osiris is death for resurrection. It has a purpose. It's very similar to the Jesus mythology, you know, where you're going through this transformation of the heart. So Mahat, you know, the scales of Mahat, where your heart is weighed to see if your heart is lighter than a feather or as light as a feather, to see if you get to move on to reincarnation, to heaven, essentially. And that is an old way of saying coherence. Do you have a coherent heart? But that's really not reflected in the Pluto mythology. The Pluto mythology is about death. It's about rape. Its emphasis is on the captive feminine. It's a violent imagery. Not that the Egyptian mythology is necessarily free of violence, but it's definitely not that same patriarchal violence.
It was didn't you mention that it was less trauma with the goddesses and the planets and all that?
I mean, when I look at the Egyptian mythology, I don't see as much traumatic representation. And when trauma is represented there, it's actually represented there very symbolically. Like it's a cycle. It's a mythology of cycles. It's, you know, everything is part of a whole, and the violence represents usually a movement towards balance in some way. Like Horus and Seth, you know, are locked in this huge battle for control. But what it really is the battle that brings victory and expansion and the new into harmony with the old. So it's like a representation of what happens in our psyche, and to an extent, all mythology is that. It's just that the patriarchal influences on modern astrology give it a decidedly masculine representation. You know, there was a male astrology this year that was like war in the skies, like prepare for global war, and you know, with Mars, and I was just like, yeah, that's not how I see it. I mean, I guess it could happen, but that, you know, that's the kind of stuff that you get when you look at the Mars archetype as purely the god of war instead of an initiating force that starts a journey.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And so your reports are not yours. Egyptian astrology is slightly different. And people might ask, how can it be accurate if it's not the same type of imagery or symbolism? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so it is and it isn't, right? Because there's so much patriarchal energy that is present in the collective. The patriarchy has been such a dominant force that in some sense, the traditional astrology archetypes that you're familiar with are tapping into what the patriarchy is doing.
Mhm.
So that offers one perspective, but I'll just tell you, Mia, that I laughed because in my 2020 report, I said that we would have angry clowns dancing in the halls of power and that we would need to laugh at them. And one of the predominant, I don't know if you saw this, but one of the predominant things that was going around in the Twitter feeds that I follow were these images of Donald Trump, dancing all alone at these, angry rallies. So I think that that's a funny example of the granular level of detail that can turn out right in my reports. In terms of what these reports are for, they're for people to dial in to what's beyond the patriarchy. They're opportunities for people who are on that path of deep work and have been for a long time and are really dedicated to bringing through a thriving world, to find out kind of like what clock time is it in the collective, and what's possible for people who are on that journey, which kind of leads to that sense that I have of a divided world. I love the way that Pastor Torrey Roberts, I'm a minister, so I follow all kinds of spiritual traditions, and I love this. I love some of the ministers in the Black church. And he gave a sermon where he was talking about the end of the age. And he was saying that he perceived it as love, as Jesus is growing in the hearts of some in his particular symbolism, the devil would be coming out the other side, and that we would have this divided world. But he didn't see them as really separate. He didn't see them as dualities. He saw this expression of the devil that he saw in the other side of the collective as actually an opportunity to stoke more love within ourselves and stoke more coherence, as I would put it, within ourselves. And that's what I see also when I look at this. And I think the Egyptian reports that I do are really about the people who are building and stoking love within themselves. Like I said, tapping into something that is beyond, perhaps above, perhaps more significant than the patriarchal symbolism and realities that we're seeing playing out around us. Does that make sense?
Very much so. And what would be the number one thing that people are going to want to know about 2021? I know that we opened up with that it's going to be a different space. So, but what is the one thing that you know that most people want to know?
You got to stop screwing around, honestly. Like, I forget who was that woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. I'm not going to take
Elizabeth Gilbert. Yeah.
So she did, I saw this video that she put out and she was like, there's no more practice.
Right.
Like, yes, we have to continue practices, but our time of practicing has to come to an end. It has to become our reality. And what I specifically mean is coherence has to become our reality. And I want to say in regards to that, coherence is not the same thing as bypassing. Like sometimes I go into the meditative work that I'm doing, sobbing my eyes out. Last night, I was so angry with my partner that I went upstairs to bed and I sat in my bed shaking and vacillating between two worlds, the world in which I packed myself and left, and the world of coherence, right? Coherence is the key to new vision. And it took me a good 20 or 30 minutes to rest myself from that place. And that's not bypassing. That is choosing which experience I want to have, right? That doesn't mean you have to stay in abusive situations. In fact, coherence will actually give you greater vision for what to do if you're in an abusive situation. But I was in fight, flight, freeze. I was having a trauma response. And so I just went upstairs and I sat there and shook and cried and prayed and meditated and did Reiki on the situation and on myself and on him, because I have permission to do that, until I felt the whole thing calm. So that's what I mean by coherence. It means that we no longer make decisions and take actions from that triggered place, that we choose to live our lives in a state of coherence, which is about cultivating positive emotion, cultivating love within ourselves. The work that I use to do this, for anyone who wants a tip, I use a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations, because they're really good in terms of the sound that he uses for inducing alpha states. So we really need to focus on being in alpha brain waves. Can I give a distinction on that real quick?
Sure. I was gonna talk about it too. Go ahead.
So trauma actually puts us into high beta brain waves. These are the brain waves of fear and anger and distress, and they alter the way that we respond to and see a situation. And I'll give you a really important piece of information on that. When you are struggling with PTSD, which I do have, and I work with people who have it, you lose the brain circuit that allows for true discernment gets short-circuited. So your hippocampus gets triggered by information, and instead of relaying that information to your prefrontal cortex, where your logic center is and can make distinctions, it just goes straight to the amygdala. So the way that actually looks is that, like right now we're celebrating the Virgin of Guadalupe, lots of explosions. Your brain would not stop to be like, explosion, is that a firework or gunfire or war? And answer the question. If you had PTSD around gunfire and explosions, you would just hit the floor like 1,000 times a day between now and mid-December, right? Versus having it relayed to your prefrontal cortex and your brain comes back with the answer, oh, nope, it's December. Nothing
Right. Having a celebration. Yeah.
So we have to get that circuit restored, and we have to restore the alpha bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind. So when we're doing these coherence practices, we are creating for ourselves a more fulsome version of reality. We're coming out of our PTSD trauma responses consciously and intentionally, not bypassing, shifting what we see and the wholeness of, shifting into the wholeness of our brains instead of the short-circuited brains that we have when we are in the PTSD zone, like I was last night. I was deep in that zone last night.
Yeah. The thing, one of the little things that I want to throw in that I love about beta and alpha is something that the American Indians talk about is beta is land of the living dead. We're just moving along in an unconscious state. And alpha is where we want to be in the conscious state. And so I love that you went into that. You went into it a lot deeper than I was even going to go into it, but that's Rebecka. That's why I love your work. It's brilliant.
Well, and I'm the 6th generation after the Choctaw Trail of Tears, and on my mother's side, we're also Modoc. And I didn't grow up in my native culture, and I'm not here to teach you native practices, and I'm not going to quote any native elders. What I will tell you is that my perception of colonization as it manifests in the human body is incoherence. So the decolonization of the human body, which by the way is not for white folks. You guys have unsettling work to do. You have other things to do, but decolonization is first and foremost about land back for indigenous people. But if I look at it from a metaphysical perspective, it is, as you mentioned, Mia, getting out of the brain states of victimization that genocide created. And I feel like it's important for people listening here to see that what I'm talking about has huge social justice implications. Like, I'm finally giving myself permission to step into that reality that we cannot get to true social justice when we are still working from the incoherence of collective trauma. And some of my work is going to be moving in the direction of working with that intergenerational and collective trauma, from the perspective of opening up new vision and a new state of being that's very similar to the old state of being, by the way, that was pre-colonial. So I'm glad that you brought that up and gave me a chance to mention that.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on with me today. Will you do me a favor, and after we're through here, either send to me, which I think you did, or put it on this. Everybody, you can have the link to the report. It is for sale. It's affordable. It's great. There's also a program that goes along with it that I took when I had Rebecca do my report, I don't know, 3 years ago or something. I took her class so I could understand. Amazing. It was brilliant. It was really good. So I'm going to make sure that those of you on Facebook can see that. If you're on my email list, this is going out in the next 24 hours to you guys. So,
well, and it's really easy to find, Mia. I finally got my links working. So if you want the report, which leads to the network, which is where you find, a sort of graduated opportunities for doing this work with me. The report can be found at the website firebrand.vision. And that will reroute you to the sales page where once you make your payment, you get a download link. And then if anybody really wants it, you can message me. I also have, I can give it to you in a flip book format so that you can more easily perhaps manage it on your devices. I'm sorry, guys, I don't sell my stuff on Amazon or anything like that because they just take so much of it that I don't make any money. So the only way you can get this is PDF.
yeah. And let me tell you guys, her stuff is really amazing. And it's also, it's affordable enough that if you desire it, you can get it, literally. It's not cheap, but it's affordable enough. It's beautiful. All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us. And we'll see you all in another time on Facebook, or we'll see you in one of Rebecca's classes. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.